Supporters of President Trump stormed the U.S. Capitol building today in Washington, D.C., forcing lawmakers to evacuate and take shelter during the ceremonial count of the Electoral College vote to certify Joe Biden's victory.
One thing, I hope what they take away is this. This is not going to get in the way of the will of the voters.
Tonight, lawmakers here in Washington are reacting to this act of insurrection in our nation's capital.
Meantime, protesters in Spokane gathered for what they have called the Stop the Steal rally. Grem 2 News starts right now.
Just historic moments in the U.S. today. A mob of pro-Trump supporters banging on the door of the U.S. Capitol. It was the moment they breached police barricades, making their way into the building and inside the Senate chambers.
We know a woman was shot and killed today inside the Capitol building, but we have now learned that Congress will resume their session tonight. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for Grem 2 News at 5 tonight. I'm Mark Hanrahan.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Whitney Ward. Just an extraordinary day here in the United States. An angry mob storming the U.S. Capitol during a joint session of Congress.
That mob pushed past Capitol Police and forced lawmakers to take shelter in barricaded rooms as they roamed through the halls of Congress. Things did turn violent and destructive as police struggled to retake the Capitol.
So all of this, of course, unfolding as Congress was meeting for the ceremonial count of all of those electoral college votes to confirm Joe Biden's win in the presidential race, a vote several Republicans said they had planned to object to, citing unfounded claims of voter fraud.
And breaking news here in Washington, in Olympia today, demonstrators broke through a gate in front of Governor Inslee's mansion in Washington. You see him shaking the gate right there, trying to get in as another one walks through that open gate. Before that, a peaceful crowd of about 300 to 400 people gathered at the Capitol, upset with the 2020 election results. A spokesperson for the governor said the governor is in a safe location. Washington State Patrol just said in the last hour they are investigating how it was even possible for protesters to make it onto the mansion grounds. This property is secure tonight. Meantime, back at the U.S. Capitol, authorities have announced that the building is now secure.
So today's insurrection marking the first time the U.S. Capitol building has been overrun since the British attacked and burned the building back in 1814. Here now is Natalie Brand with CBS News.
Shaken the U.S. Capitol and the country.
Law enforcement swarmed the U.S. Capitol to clear the grounds after rioters stormed the building. The protest mob broke through doors and busted windows. The vice president and congressional leaders were whisked from the House and Senate floor to safety before protesters breached the chambers. Capitol Police drew their weapons at one barricaded door from inside the House.
We forcefully got pushed through.
CBS News spoke with protester Boyd Camper from Montana, who was inside the Capitol.
Now, we did charge the aisle into the chambers, and we got tear gas and we got pushed back. Okay? And after that, I retreated.
You have to go home now. We have to have peace.
President Trump tweeted a video falsely claiming the election was stolen, but urging calm from his supporters. Hours earlier, he addressed a gathering near the White House.
We will never give up. We will never concede.
President-elect Joe Biden also addressed the chaos here, calling it an assault on democracy and an insurrection.
Today's reminder, a painful one, that democracy is fragile, and to preserve it requires people of goodwill, leaders with the courage to stand up.
I rise up for myself and 60 of my colleagues to object.
Ahead of the chaos, members of the House and Senate had broken from joint session to debate a challenge by some GOP members to Arizona's electoral votes. Oregon Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley tweeted a photo showing the electoral ballots were also moved to a secure location to protect them from the rioters.
And new this hour, Congress members are now returning to the U.S. Capitol building to resume the counting of the electoral votes. Meanwhile, over at the White House, CBS News has confirmed that First Lady Melania Trump's chief of staff, Stephanie Grisham, a longtime loyalist of the president, has tonight resigned. On Capitol Hill, I'm Natalie Brandt. Now back to you.
Just an incredible turn of events just in a matter of hours.
A lot went on today and continues to take place,
Exactly.
right?
Now, earlier today, the president did release a brief video on Twitter where he told the mob inside the Capitol to leave. It was posted several hours after he spoke directly to the crowd, telling them the election was stolen and that something needs to be done. He again repeated those unfounded claims that he actually won the election.
So within the last hour, Twitter announced it was requiring the removal of 3 of the president's tweets, citing repeated and severe violation of our civic integrity policy. That means the president's Twitter account will remain locked for 12 hours. If the tweets are not removed, Twitter says the account will remain locked. Meantime, President-elect Joe Biden also addressed the nation earlier today, calling the mob an attack on the Citadel of Liberty.
What we're seeing are a small number of extremists dedicated to lawlessness. This is not dissent. It's disorder. It's chaos. It borders on sedition. And it must end now.
Meantime, Eastern Washington Congresswoman Cathy McMorris Rodgers was in D.C. and new tonight has announced that she will reverse course now and not object to the certification of the Electoral College vote.
So this coming just one day after she announced her intentions to support those objections. Our Ian Smay is live in the KREM 2 newsroom tonight to explain how all of this has unfolded just in the last 24 hours. Ian?
That's right, Whitney. Representative Cathy McMorris Rodgers released a statement just hours ago stating that she would in fact be changing course. Rodgers said in part, quote, "I have been consistent in my belief that Americans should utilize the constitutional tools and legal processes available to seek answers to their questions about the 2020 election. What we have seen today is unlawful and unacceptable. I've decided I will vote to uphold the Electoral College results, and I encourage Donald Trump to condemn and put an end to this madness." Now, earlier today in a tweet, the Congresswoman said, "Stop these attacks on Capitol Police who serve to protect the people's house. Protesting peacefully is your right. Violence, aggression, and breaching security perimeters are not. Stop this now." Her decision earlier today was a surprise after announcing that yesterday that she did plan to object to the Electoral College results. Yesterday's statement said in part, quote, "This week's vote is not about overturning an election. It is about examining allegations of potential fraud, certifying that states are protecting election integrity, and ensuring people's voices are heard." KREM has previously asked Rodgers to outline the specific allegations of voter fraud her office had seen. A spokesperson for Rodgers did not respond to our questions. Just a few hours ago, it was reported that the Capitol building is now considered secure after it was breached earlier in the day. One woman has died in the violence today in Washington, D.C. Whitney, Mark.
All right, Ian, thank you very much. Meantime, Washington Governor Jay Inslee called the U.S. Capitol breach a, quote, "an attack on democracy itself. It was fueled, precipitated, and induced by the unrelenting and totally discredited lies of Donald Trump and his lackeys in Congress." He goes on to urge President Trump's supporters to, quote, "stand up for our most precious gift of democracy and the institutions that have preserved for 2 centuries.
Meanwhile, supporters of President Trump also plan protests here in Spokane today.
KREM 2's Casey Decker has spent the day at these peaceful protests. And Casey, what's going on now?
Well, Mark, the protest wrapped up today around 3:30 p.m. here at the Spokane County Courthouse. It all began, we'll go ahead and show you some video of the start of this protest at around 11 a.m. today. Cars, you can hear them there honking their horns, lots of trucks honking their horns, waving Trump flags. That began at the Spokane Arena. They then proceeded to kind of drive about the city. Originally, that was going to be an organized parade of some sort, but they got quickly pretty separated, and so it was just kind of cars roaming around Spokane for a while this morning. Eventually, they did mostly regroup at the Spokane Arena, and that's when they came over here to the Spokane County Courthouse and staged an on-foot demonstration outside of the courthouse. Now, like you mentioned, these protests here in Spokane were peaceful, unlike the violent insurrection that we saw in D.C. However, when I spoke with local protesters, many of them thought the actions of those insurrectionists in D.C. were justified. Take a listen.
The people are fed up. That's what it's coming down to. The people are tired of what the globalists, of what the Marxists are pushing. We're tired of that leftist agenda, and that's what you're seeing. You're seeing real anger that's coming down upon America right now.
Now, of course, these protests today were based around the baseless idea that the election was somehow stolen from outgoing President Trump, when in fact it was rightly won by President-elect Joe Biden. However, there were some other chants that I heard as well today. Reopen Washington was one, as well as Back the Blue, perhaps ironic given the violent protests in D.C. going directly up against police. But Again, here in Spokane today, locally, protesters, as far as we know, remained totally peaceful. For now, reporting in Spokane, Casey Decker, KREM 2 News.
Casey, thank you very much. Also breaking at this hour, the Democrats have won both Senate seats within the last few minutes. We're talking about Georgia here. The Associated Press declared Democrat Jon Ossoff as the winner of the runoff election against incumbent Republican David Perdue. CBS previously called the other runoff in Georgia for Democrat Raphael Warnock over Kelly Loeffler.
So much of the focus lately when it comes to the election results has been on Georgia. We know that Joe Biden did win that state, although President Trump has so far refused to accept that. He even unsuccessfully tried to pressure the state's elections chief, a fellow Republican, to somehow overturn the results. Now, Washington's own elections chief, Kim Wyman, also a Republican, spoke with KREM 2 today. She says she actually visited Georgia recently and saw for herself that their process is secure, but she worries the rhetoric to the contrary could have lasting impacts on American democracy.
And it undermines our country because then the elected leaders aren't legitimate. And if the elected leaders aren't legitimate, government isn't legitimate. And, this plays into the hands of our foreign adversaries who are trying to undermine our country from within. And when we have people within our country saying our elections aren't legitimate, it's a dangerous place for our republic.
And we are continuing to track the latest updates from the nation's capital tonight. For more on the situation in D.C. as well as local updates at rallies, continue to head to krem.com. In other local news tonight, Spokane police shot and killed a murder suspect last night in North Spokane.
It's after officers say that man fired shots at them while they were attempting to execute a traffic stop. Our Amanda Rowley has the latest on that tonight.
Last night, Spokane police believe they found the murder suspect of the December 27th homicide in East Central Spokane. They had an arrest warrant for the suspect for second-degree murder. Investigators have spent nearly 2 weeks searching for the East Central Spokane shooting suspect. The victim is identified as 41-year-old Joseph Buskick. That shooting happened on December 27th. When police arrived, they found Buskick inside a home with a gunshot wound to his torso. He told police he was shot outside while standing next to his car. The victim later died at the hospital. Last night, police believe they located the shooting suspect driving in North Spokane. They attempted to pull him over, but had to use a pit maneuver as he attempted to drive away. After the car stopped, Spokane police say the suspect got out of the vehicle and fired at officers. Police Chief Craig Meidel confirms the suspect fired at least one round. He told police he was not going back to prison and would go into a shootout with officers if they tried to take him. Police returned fire and hit the suspect, who died from his injuries. No officers were injured. The suspect's identity has not yet been released. The Spokane County Sheriff's Office is now investigating the officer-involved shooting. Reporting in Spokane, Amanda Rowley, KREM 2 News.
Amanda, thank you very much. Back to that breaking news in Olympia, where protesters pushed through the gate at the governor's mansion.
Drew Mickelson has been at the Capitol covering this protest all day long. Drew, thank you for taking the time to talk with us. What do we understand about what started as a peaceful protest up until that moment when they breached the gates? What can you tell us about that?
Well, yeah, there were several hundred people who, for several hours, really from noon until about 3, who were passionate but peaceful, demonstrating on the front steps of the Washington State Capitol, which we cover all the time. But then late this afternoon, as the crowd was sort of dying off, they headed right next door here to the governor's executive mansion. Maybe about 100 or so folks came over here. They were chanting for the governor to come out. They're really upset at the governor's COVID-19 restrictions. They started grabbing the main gate here and then eventually broke through the pedestrian gate on the sidewalk here. And a good 50-plus folks walked on to the governor's mansion property. We had video of it earlier. I'm not sure if you're able to cue that up, but several dozen folks went to the governor's front porch. They were chanting, they were waving flags. But other than the damage here at the gate, no damage was done to the Capitol mansion. The mansion was not actually broken into. No windows or anything were broken. The governor was at the mansion at the time, but we were told he was either removed from the property or placed in a safe location. They wouldn't get more detail than that. We are expecting to hear from the governor later this evening. The Washington State Patrol is taking this very seriously. No one has been arrested. But technically, if you go onto that property, you are trespassing, and those folks could face trespassing charges. We just saw an investigator from the FBI show up here at the mansion property. So they are definitely taking this seriously, but they are thankful that nobody was injured. At this point, no one was arrested. The State Patrol spokesperson said it seemed like these people just wanted to make their point, and once they did, after about 10 minutes or so, they all left peacefully. So they were grateful that this wasn't any worse. They're a little concerned because next week the legislative session starts, and they're hoping this is not a sign of what they can expect here going into January. Back to you in Spokane.
Hey, Drew, quick question for you. Do you have any gauge on if these protesters are all from the west side there, or are they from all over the state of Washington?
It was hard to tell. You know, I spoke with somebody, Mark, up in Linwood. Spoke with a number of folks that I recognize from the South Puget Sound region. But earlier today, I saw there was a bus from Kittitas that was bringing folks over the pass. So this was advertised across the state, although there were similar Stop the Steal rallies happening other places in the state. But at one point, there were 400 people, and a lot of folks took off work and brought their kids and made a day of it.
Drew, quickly, I just want to ask you about the Washington State Patrol, which now says they're concerned that it was even possible that they were able to breach that gate. What do you know about that?
Well, yeah, it's, you know, we're only 2 hours into it, so we don't exactly know what happened as far as, you know, what should the gate have been more secure, that kind of thing. I can tell you, though, that there were 5 or 6 people, if not more than that, that were really shaking the vehicle gate that slides open, and that they could not get through, and then somebody was able to push through the side gate. I asked the State Patrol if they were prepared for this, because it appeared there was only one uniformed officer on the other side of that gate, and she was not able to hold the crowd back. There were a number of officers who were on the campus, but they were purposefully kind of staying back. They didn't want to agitate the crowd, and that's why they said they didn't arrest people when they first got here on the property. But I did ask the State Patrol if they were prepared for this, and I was told we can always do better. So I think they're here on scene to try to figure out how they can make this a one-time thing.
All right, Drew Mickelson in Olympia tonight. Thank you very much.